The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as I heard my wife Lena's voice drift through the garage window at midnight. Real men don't argue, Gavin. They just pay and shut up. I froze under the belly of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, my heart hammering against my ribs like a piston with bad timing. 23 years of marriage, and I'd never heard Lena use that tone with me. Hell, I'd never heard her mention anyone named Gavin. Nick? Her voice shifted, sweet as antifreeze. You still working out there, honey? I wiped my hands on my coveralls and crawled out from under the car. Through the kitchen window, I could see her silhouette pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear. Her BMW sat in the driveway next to my rusted pickup truck like a sleek shark beside a dying fish. Yeah, almost done, I called back, keeping my voice steady. Inside, my gut churned like a cement mixer full of broken glass. Lena Morales, née Patterson, had always been out of my league. Back in high school, she was the homecoming queen, dating the quarterback while I was the mechanic's kid with grease under his fingernails. Somehow, 25 years ago, she'd married me anyway. Said she loved my honesty, my work ethic, my realness. Now, at 47, I was still the same honest, hard-working guy, but Lena had transformed into something else entirely. She'd climbed the corporate ladder at Patterson and Associates, her father's old advertising firm, wearing designer suits and carrying herself like she owned the world, which in our little town of Mills Lake she pretty much did. I crept closer to the window, straining to hear more of her conversation. The cabin's perfect for the weekend, she was saying. Nick will be at his boxing gym with Robbie, like always. We'll have complete privacy. My blood turned to ice water. The cabin, our cabin, the one we'd bought together 15 years ago as our forever retreat. The place where we'd talked about growing old together, watching sunsets over the lake. Trust me, Gavin. After Saturday night, you'll understand why I married beneath me. It makes the contrast so much sweeter. The phone call ended, and I heard her heels clicking across the kitchen floor. I scrambled back under the Buick, grabbing my wrench with trembling fingers. When she appeared in the garage doorway, I was the picture of focused concentration. Working late again? She leaned against the doorframe, her auburn hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Even at 45, Lena could stop traffic. Tonight, though, her beauty felt like a knife between my ribs. Mrs. Henderson needs this done by morning, I said, not looking up. Promised her grandson I'd have it ready for his job interview. Lena made a dismissive sound. You're too soft, Nick. Always helping people who can't afford to pay full price. It's called being decent. Well, I thought it's called being a pushover. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, I'll be gone this weekend. Corporate retreat up at the cabin. Team building exercises, strategy sessions. You know how it is? I knew how it was, all right. Sure, honey. Have fun. After she left, I sat in the garage for another hour, staring at my calloused hands. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of thinking I was the luckiest bastard in Mills Lake. 23 years of being played for a fool. The next morning, I called in sick to the garage where I worked. Instead, I drove to Robbie's boxing gym on the rough side of town. Robbie Martinez had been my best friend since we were kids, back when we both thought our fists could solve any problem. Now 50 years old and built like a refrigerator, Robbie ran a gym that served as part training facility, part therapy session for guys like us. You look like someone ran over your dog, Robbie said, wrapping my hands for a session with the heavy bag. What's eating you? I told him everything, about the phone call, about Gavin, about the cabin. Robbie listened without interrupting, his dark eyes growing harder with each detail. Son of a bitch, he finally said. 23 years, and she's throwing it away for some corporate pretty boy? Seems that way. I threw a right cross that made the heavy bag jump. Question is, what do I do about it? You could confront her. Another punch, harder this time. And say what? Hey, honey, I overheard you planning to cheat on me. She'd just deny it, make me feel crazy. You could follow her. Get proof. I paused, considering. Then what? Divorce court? She makes 3 times what I do, has all the connections in town. I'd be lucky to keep my truck. Robbie unwrapped my hands, his expression thoughtful. You know what your problem is, Nick? You always fight fair, but sometimes when someone sucker punches you, you gotta hit back twice as hard. That afternoon, I drove past Patterson and Associates, a gleaming glass building downtown that looked like it had been transplanted from Chicago. Through the windows, I could see Lena in a conference room, gesturing animatedly at a presentation screen. She looked confident, powerful, completely in control. Sitting in the parking lot was a silver Tesla with vanity plates reading GAVIN1. I'd found my target. Gavin Bell turned out to be everything I'd expected, and worse. 38 years old, perfectly styled hair, and a smile that belonged on a toothpaste commercial. I watched him from across the street as he left the building at 6 o'clock sharp, checking his reflection in every window he passed. He was younger than me, richer than me, and apparently more appealing to my wife. But he had one crucial weakness. He was soft. I could tell from the way he walked, the way he held himself. He'd never been in a real fight, never had to work for anything that mattered. That night, Lena came home late, claiming she'd been working on the presentation for the weekend retreat. She kissed my cheek with lips that tasted like lies and went straight to bed. I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering how long this had been going on. Friday morning, she packed her bags with unusual care. Designer clothes, expensive perfume, lingerie I hadn't seen in years. She kissed me goodbye, like always, promised to call from the cabin, and drove away in her BMW. I waited exactly 1 hour, then followed. The lakeside motel sat on the wrong side of Mills Lake like a guilty secret. Paint peeling, neon sign flickering, the kind of place where people paid cash and didn't ask for receipts. I parked behind a cluster of pine trees and watched Lena's BMW pull into the lot at exactly 2 o'clock. She didn't go to our cabin. She went to room 12, where Gavin's Tesla was already waiting. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear muffled voices, then laughter, then silence. The smart thing would have been to drive away, call a lawyer, start divorce proceedings. But 23 years of marriage doesn't die quietly. It screams and thrashes and demands blood. I got out of the truck and walked to the Tesla. The car was unlocked, because who would steal a car in sleepy Mills Lake? I popped the glove compartment and found the registration. Gavin Michael Bell, 1247 Lakeshore Drive. The address was in the expensive part of town, where houses had 3-car garages and manicured lawns. From my pocket, I pulled out my wedding ring. 23 years of wearing it had left a permanent indent in my finger, a groove carved by promises and vows and midnight conversations about forever. I placed it carefully on the Tesla's hood, right where Gavin couldn't miss it. Then I took my house key, the sharp, jagged one, and carved a single word into the driver's side door. Payback! The metal screamed as I dragged the key through the paint, leaving a scar that would cost more to fix than I made in a month. It felt good. It felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. I was back in my truck and halfway home when my phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Having a wonderful time at the retreat. Miss you? I typed back, miss you too. Can't wait to hear all about it. The lies came so easily now. Saturday morning brought Mrs. Rundle to my door. Our 70-year-old neighbor had made gossip into an art form, collecting secrets like other people collected stamps. She stood on my porch in her housecoat and curlers, clutching a cup of coffee and practically vibrating with excitement. Nick, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right with you and Lena? I kept my expression neutral. Of course, Mrs. Rundle. Why would you ask? Well, it's just that I saw her car at that awful motel yesterday afternoon. You know, the one where those terrible people go? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I was driving past on my way to the pharmacy, and there she was, clear as day. You must be mistaken. Lena's at a corporate retreat. Mrs. Rundle's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, I'm quite sure it was her. That fancy BMW with the vanity plates. And there was a man with her. Younger fellow, very handsome. They seemed quite friendly. I let the silence stretch just long enough to seem shocked. I'm sure there's an explanation. Of course, dear. I'm sure there is. But her tone suggested she hoped there wasn't. After she left, I called Robbie. I need you to do me a favor. Name it. Lena's supposed to be at a corporate retreat this weekend. Can you call Patterson and Associates? Ask to speak with her? Say it's about your wife's car or something? 20 minutes later, Robbie called back. Their office is closed for the weekend. No retreat scheduled. The receptionist said the whole staff has the weekend off. The final piece clicked into place. Lena hadn't just cheated on me. She'd lied about it with the kind of elaborate detail that suggested this wasn't her first time. I spent the rest of Saturday planning. Not revenge, not yet. Just research. Gavin Bell lived in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Manicured lawn, circular driveway, windows that probably cost more than my annual salary. I drove past 3 times, memorizing the layout, noting the security cameras, the automatic sprinkler system, the pristine Tesla parked in the driveway like a trophy. Sunday evening, Lena came home glowing with satisfaction. She hugged me tight, told me all about the retreat, the team-building exercises, the strategy sessions, the breakthrough moments that would revolutionize the company. She was a gifted storyteller. I'd give her that. Every detail was perfect, every lie polished to a shine. You seem different, I said over dinner. Refreshed. It was exactly what I needed. Sometimes you have to step away from your routine to remember who you really are. And who are you, Lena? She smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm your wife, Nick. I'm exactly where I belong. That night, she made love to me with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. Afterward, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and felt something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something cleaner, more focused. It was purpose. Monday morning, I drove to work like always, but instead of going to the garage, I parked across from Patterson and Associates and waited. At lunchtime, Lena and Gavin emerged together, walking close but not quite touching. They went to Romano's, the expensive Italian place where Lena and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary. Through the restaurant window, I watched them share a bottle of wine and feed each other dessert. Gavin made her laugh in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked at him like he was the answer to every question she'd ever asked. I took pictures with my phone. Not for divorce court. I had bigger plans now. These were for later, when the time was right. That evening, Lena came home and complained about her boring day, her difficult clients, her exhausting schedule. She was tired, she said. Too tired for conversation, too tired for anything but sleep. I nodded and smiled and played the understanding husband. But inside, something had shifted. The man who'd married Lena Patterson 23 years ago was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that nice guys don't just finish last, they get destroyed. Tuesday brought the first crack in Lena's perfect facade. I was having coffee with Robbie at the diner when my phone rang. Nick? Lena's voice was tight with panic. Someone vandalized Gavin's car, scratched up the door, left some kind of threat. That's terrible, I said, catching Robbie's eye. Did he call the police? He doesn't want to make a big deal of it. You know how these things are? Probably just kids being stupid. Probably. I took a sip of coffee. How do you know about it? A pause. What? How do you know about Gavin's car? I thought you said you barely knew him. Another pause, longer this time. We work together, Nick. Word travels fast around the office. Right, of course. But I could hear the fear in her voice now. Someone knew, someone was watching. Someone was ready to turn her perfect little world upside down. And they were just getting started. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like rust eating through metal, until one morning I woke up and realized I wasn't the same man anymore. The old Nick Morales would have confronted his wife, demanded explanations, maybe thrown a punch at her lover and called it even. The new Nick was smarter than that. The new Nick understood that real revenge wasn't about satisfaction. It was about destruction. I started with research. 23 years of marriage had taught me Lena's habits, her passwords, her weaknesses. She used the same password for everything. Our wedding date followed by her maiden name. She thought she was clever, but she was just predictable. Her laptop was easy to access while she showered each morning. Her email revealed a treasure trove of secrets. The affair with Gavin had been going on for 8 months. They'd used company funds for their getaways. Most interesting of all, Lena had been falsifying her credentials for years. Her MBA from Northwestern was a complete fabrication. But the real bombshell was in her financial records. Our house, the one we'd bought together, the one I'd spent 15 years improving with my own hands, was mortgaged to the hilt. Lena had been using it as collateral for high-risk investments that had gone south. We were 3 months from foreclosure. She'd been stealing from me for years, and I'd never suspected a thing. Wednesday evening, I met Robbie at his gym. The place was empty, except for us and the heavy bags that had absorbed decades of frustration and rage. You look different, Robbie said, watching me wrap my hands. Calmer. I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. He held the bag steady as I threw a combination. What's the plan? They want to play games? I'll show them what a real game looks like. My first move was subtle. Lena had been planning a big presentation for Friday, a pitch to land the Morrison account, worth $500,000 to the agency. I knew because she'd been practicing in front of the bathroom mirror for weeks. I also knew that Gavin was supposed to assist with the technical aspects of the presentation. What Lena didn't know was that Gavin had been embezzling money from the company's equipment budget to fund their affair. A simple, anonymous email to Morrison Industries with documentation I'd pulled from Lena's computer was all it took. By Thursday morning, Morrison had pulled out of the meeting, citing concerns about the agency's financial integrity. Lena came home that night devastated. I don't understand what happened, she said, pacing around our kitchen like a caged animal. Everything was perfect. The presentation was flawless. Maybe they just weren't the right client, I suggested, stirring pasta sauce with exaggerated concern. You'll bounce back. You always do. She looked at me with something that might have been gratitude. You're right. I'm probably overthinking it. If only she knew. Friday brought phase 2. I'd spent the week learning Gavin's routine, and the man was nothing if not predictable. Every morning at 7:30, he stopped at the same coffee shop. Every evening at 6, he went to the same gym. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he played tennis at the country club. And every Friday afternoon, he detailed his precious Tesla in the parking lot behind his office building. I waited until he went inside for his weekly massage, because of course Gavin got weekly massages, then made my move. The Tesla was unlocked, as usual. Apparently having money made people careless. I'd brought supplies, a jar of honey, a bag of birdseed, and a small container of liquid fish fertilizer. I spread the honey liberally across the interior, sprinkled birdseed over the seats, and poured the fertilizer into the air conditioning vents. Then I waited. Gavin's scream could be heard 3 blocks away. By the time he got the car to a detailing shop, the smell had set in permanently. The honey had attracted every insect in a 5-mile radius. The birdseed had drawn a flock of pigeons that treated his car like their personal bathroom. The Tesla, his pride and joy, his symbol of success, was ruined. But I wasn't done. That evening, Lena came home in a state of barely controlled panic. "Someone's targeting the office," she said. "First the Morrison account, now Gavin's car. What if we're next?" "Next for what?" I asked innocently. "I don't know. Harassment, sabotage. What if someone knows about—" She caught herself. "Knows about what?" "Nothing. Just office politics. You know how competitive things can get." I nodded sympathetically and offered to make dinner. While she paced and made phone calls, I prepared her favorite meal and opened a bottle of wine. We ate by candlelight, just like old times. "You're being so sweet," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I don't deserve you." "No," I agreed quietly. "You don't—" She laughed, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't joking anymore. I was done pretending, done playing the fool, done being the understanding husband who turned the other cheek. Saturday morning brought the weekend I'd been planning for. Lena announced another work emergency. She and Gavin needed to strategize about the recent problems. They'd be at the cabin all weekend, working on damage control. "Of course," I said. "Do what you have to do." She kissed my cheek and left in her BMW, probably thinking she was so clever, so careful. She had no idea that I'd been tracking her phone for weeks, that I knew every lie she'd told, every secret she thought she'd kept. An hour after she left, I drove to Gavin's house. The Tesla was gone, probably still at the shop, getting fumigated, but his backup car, a red Corvette, sat in the driveway like a sitting duck. I didn't damage it. That would have been crude, obvious. Instead, I left something on the windshield, a manila envelope containing printouts of every email between him and my wife, every financial record showing their theft, every piece of evidence that could destroy both their careers. Attached was a simple note: "Stop, or everyone sees these. You have 48 hours. Then I went home and waited. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Gavin's voice was tight with fear. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Look, I know you're angry, but this doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out." "You're right," I said. "It doesn't have to get ugly." "It's going to get ugly." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, Mrs. Rundle was watering her garden, probably hoping to catch some gossip. I waved cheerfully and went back inside. Lena came home an hour later, her face pale and drawn. "Nick, we need to talk." "About what?" "About us. About our marriage. About the things that haven't been working." I looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still polished, still everything I'd thought I wanted, but now I could see the cracks in the facade, the desperation behind the perfect smile. "You want a divorce?" I said. "I think it might be best. For both of us. We've grown apart, become different people. Maybe it's time to admit that and move on." "Move on with Gavin?" Her face went white. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the lake where we'd once planned to grow old together. "The question is, what are you willing to pay to keep your secrets quiet? Nick, please, let's be civilized about this." I turned back to her, and she took a step backward. Maybe she saw something in my eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe she finally understood that the man she'd married was gone. "Civilized?" I smiled, and it felt like breaking glass. "Honey, we're way past civilized." Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee on my front porch, watching the sunrise paint Mills Lake gold and orange, when Claire Morrison pulled into my driveway. Claire had been Lena's best friend since college, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. She worked as a freelance consultant, which seemed to mean she got paid for telling other people what they were doing wrong. "Nick," she said, climbing out of her Mercedes with practiced grace. "We need to talk." "Morning, Claire. Coffee's fresh if you want some." "This isn't a social call." She settled into the chair across from me, her expression serious. "I know what you've been doing. Drinking coffee and watching the sunrise? Guilty as charged. Don't play dumb. The Morrison account, Gavin's car, the threats. Very clever, very methodical. But you're missing the bigger picture." I set down my coffee cup and studied her face. What bigger picture? Lena didn't start this affair on her own. She had help, encouragement, someone who convinced her that she deserved better than a small-town mechanic. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You. Claire's smile was razor-thin. Took you long enough to figure it out. For a man planning such an elaborate revenge, you're remarkably slow on the uptake. Why? Because 15 years ago, you humiliated me in front of half the town. Remember? My car broke down, you said you'd fix it for free, then charged me $800 when I couldn't afford it. I lost my job because I couldn't get to work. Had to move back in with my parents. Do you remember that, Nick? I did remember. Claire had been going through a divorce, struggling to make ends meet. Her ex-husband had left her with nothing but debts and a car that barely ran. I'd offered to help, then gotten greedy when I saw her desperation. That was business, I said weakly. That was cruelty. And I've been waiting 15 years to pay you back. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with malice. Lena was so easy to manipulate. All I had to do was point out how much better she could do, how she was wasting her life with a man who had no ambition. I introduced her to Gavin, encouraged the flirtation, pushed her toward the affair. She made her own choices. Did she? Or did she just follow the path I laid out for her? Claire stood up, smoothing her skirt. The beautiful thing is, you're destroying her for me. Every move you make, every piece of revenge you plan, it all serves my purpose. Which is to watch you both burn. Lena loses her marriage, her career, her reputation. You lose your wife, your home, your dignity. And I get to watch it all happen from the front row. She walked back to her car, then paused at the driver's door. Oh, and Nick? Gavin isn't the only one she's been seeing. You might want to check her phone records more carefully. After Claire left, I sat on the porch for a long time, staring at the lake. I'd thought I was the puppet master, pulling strings and orchestrating revenge, but I'd been dancing to someone else's tune all along. That afternoon, I drove to Robbie's gym. I needed to hit something, needed to feel the satisfying impact of fist against leather. But when I walked in, I found Robbie talking to two men in expensive suits. Nick, Robbie said, his voice carefully neutral. These gentlemen are from Patterson and Associates. They're asking questions about you. The taller of the two men stepped forward. Mr. Morales, I'm James Patterson, Lena's boss. We need to discuss some recent irregularities, such as anonymous emails containing confidential company information, harassment of our employees, vandalism of company property. His smile was cold as winter. We have security footage of you in our parking lot, photographs of you following our staff members. That's stalking, Mr. Morales. I was visiting my wife's workplace. Your wife has filed a restraining order against you. As of this morning, you're not allowed within 500 feet of her, her workplace, or any Patterson and Associates employee. The papers he handed me were official, legal, and devastating. Lena had beaten me to the punch, painting me as an unstable, violent husband who'd become obsessed with destroying her career. This is bullshit, I said. The judge didn't think so. Neither do the police. Patterson's smile widened. You see, Mr. Morales, you're not the only one who can play games. The difference is, we play to win. After they left, Robbie poured us both a beer and sat down heavily on a bench. They got you good, brother. It's not over. Maybe it should be. Cut your losses, start fresh somewhere else. No. I crushed the empty beer can in my fist. They want to escalate? Fine. Let's see how they handle a real war. That night, I broke into my own house. Technically, it was still half mine until the divorce was final, but Lena had changed the locks. I slipped in through the basement window I'd been meaning to fix for months. Lena was upstairs, talking on the phone. From the tone of her voice, I could tell she was talking to Gavin. They were celebrating, planning their next move, discussing how to divide my assets once the divorce was final. I made my way to her home office and accessed her computer one last time. What I found there made my blood run cold. The affair with Gavin was just the beginning. Lena had been systematically stealing from me for years, forging my signature on loan documents, using my credit to fund her lifestyle, planning to leave me bankrupt and broken. The house wasn't just mortgaged, it was leveraged against investments that didn't exist. But the worst part was the emails between her and Claire. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years. Every fight we'd had, every moment of distance between us had been orchestrated. They'd played me like a violin, and I danced to their tune without ever knowing the music was playing. I copied everything to a flash drive, then did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at her phone records. Claire had been right. Gavin wasn't the only one. There had been others. A parade of younger men, each one another knife in the back of our marriage. As I prepared to leave, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lena was coming down to her office, probably to gloat over her victory. I slipped out the basement window just as the office light came on. Walking back to my truck, I felt something settle into place in my chest. Not anger anymore, not hurt, something colder and more focused. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd destroyed me. They had no idea what destruction really looked like. The Mills Lake Summer Festival happened every year on the first weekend of August. The whole town turned out for it. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers looking for trouble, everyone gathered around the lake for food trucks, carnival games, and a concert on the floating stage. This year, I had special plans for the festival. I spent the week making preparations. The beauty of small-town politics is that everyone knows everyone, and favors get traded like baseball cards. I'd fixed cars for half the town over the years, including the mayor's son's motorcycle and the police chief's vintage Mustang. People owed me, and it was time to collect. Getting access to the sound system was easy. Bobby Chen ran the audio equipment, and I'd rebuilt his truck's transmission for cost. Getting a spot on the program was harder, but the festival committee was always looking for local speakers, especially ones with heartwarming stories about community and marriage. I told them I wanted to give a speech about the importance of honesty in relationships. They ate it up. Friday night, the festival kicked off with a barbecue and dancing. I watched from across the lake as Lena and Gavin arrived together, no longer bothering to hide their relationship. She wore a white sundress that I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. He wore a smug expression that I was going to enjoy wiping off his face. Claire was there too, playing the role of supportive best friend, comforting Lena through her difficult divorce. She caught my eye across the crowd and raised her wine glass in a mocking toast. Saturday morning brought the main events. I arrived early and did a sound check, testing the microphone and making sure my presentation would display properly on the big screen behind the stage. The festival organizers were thrilled. They'd never had such a professional setup for a community speech. At 2 o'clock, Mayor Williams introduced me to the crowd. Nick Morales has been a pillar of our community for over 20 years. Today, he wants to share some thoughts about honesty, marriage, and the bonds that hold us together. I walked onto the stage to polite applause. The crowd was substantial, maybe 300 people scattered across the lakeside amphitheater. I could see Lena in the front section, her face pale with confusion. Gavin sat beside her, looking like he wanted to run. Claire stood near the back, her expression unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the water. "I want to talk to you today about marriage, about trust, about what happens when the people you love decide to destroy you for sport." The crowd stirred uneasily. This wasn't the heartwarming speech they'd expected. 23 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in Mills Lake. Lena Patterson was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, ambitious, sophisticated. I thought I was the luckiest man alive. I clicked a button on my remote, and the first image appeared on the screen behind me. Our wedding photo, young and hopeful and full of promises. For 23 years, I believed in our marriage. I worked 2 jobs to support her dreams. I put her through graduate school. I bought us a house, a cabin, a future together. Another click. Financial records appeared on the screen, loan documents, mortgage papers, all showing Lena's signature next to mine. What I didn't know was that my wife had been stealing from me for years, forging my signature, using our home as collateral for investments I never approved, planning to leave me bankrupt and homeless. The crowd was dead silent now. I could see people pulling out their phones, recording everything. Perfect. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that she didn't do it alone. Click. Emails between Lena and Claire appeared on the screen, detailing their plans to manipulate me, to destroy our marriage, to leave me with nothing. My wife's best friend, Claire Morrison, orchestrated the whole thing. She introduced Lena to her lover, encouraged the affair, helped plan every betrayal. Why? Because 15 years ago, I charged her full price for car repairs when she couldn't afford them. Claire started pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the stage, but people blocked her path. Everyone was staring at the screen, reading the emails, seeing the evidence. But wait, there's more. Click. Photos of Lena and Gavin at the motel, at restaurants, at our cabin. The crowd gasped. Gavin Bell, my wife's lover, has been embezzling money from Patterson and Associates to fund their affair. He's also married, by the way. His wife thinks he's at a business conference this weekend. I could see Gavin trying to leave, but the crowd had formed a circle around the amphitheater. There was nowhere to go. Now you might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Why am I airing my dirty laundry in public instead of handling it privately? I paused, letting the question hang in the air. Because they didn't just betray me. They betrayed all of you. Patterson and Associates has been billing the city for services never rendered. They've been padding invoices, inflating costs, stealing from the taxpayers of Mills Lake for years. The final click brought up the most damaging evidence. Contracts between the city and Patterson and Associates, showing systematic fraud totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. The crowd erupted. People were shouting, pointing, demanding answers. I could see Mayor Williams on his phone, probably calling the police. Too late for that. In conclusion, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, I want you all to remember something. When someone betrays you, when they try to destroy your life for their own amusement, you have two choices. You can turn the other cheek, or you can show them what real destruction looks like. I pulled out my wedding ring and held it up so everyone could see it. Lena, you once told someone that real men don't argue, they just pay and shut up. Well, I've got news for you. I threw the ring as hard as I could. It arced through the air and splashed into Mills Lake, disappearing beneath the surface. Real men don't pay, they collect. The crowd was in full uproar now. People were surrounding Lena and Gavin, demanding explanations. Claire had disappeared entirely. Police sirens wailed in the distance. I walked off the stage and through the crowd, people parting before me like the Red Sea. No one tried to stop me, no one said a word. Behind me, I could hear Lena screaming my name, but I didn't turn around. I'd said everything I needed to say. By Monday morning, the video of my speech had gone viral. Local news stations picked it up, then regional ones, then national. The internet had turned Lena, Gavin, and Claire into cautionary tales about infidelity and fraud. Patterson and Associates closed permanently. The FBI launched an investigation into the city contracts. Gavin's wife filed for divorce and took him for everything he had. Claire fled town and was last seen working at a gas station in Nebraska. Lena lost her job, her reputation, and her freedom. She was arrested on fraud charges and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. As for me, I sold everything I owned and moved to Montana, where I bought a small garage and started over. I never remarried, never looked back, never regretted a single moment of what I'd done. Sometimes, when people ask me about revenge, I tell them the truth. It's not about getting even. It's about making sure the people who hurt you understand the cost of their choices. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, if you're smart enough, if you're willing to become the villain in someone else's story, you can make them pay that cost in full, 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 in full.